Hello, and welcome to episode 26 of the Time to Calibrate podcast. With this announcement, would you believe it? This show will complete 1 full year of podcasting. Where has the time gone by? As usual, I'm Marc Levesque, and joining me today are Bob from the Time to Go Travel and Timepieces YouTube channel, and Brent Robillard from the Calibrated Wrist. How are you guys doing this fine early Friday morning?
Really good.
Really
I'm
good. How are you?
Good. I got the morning voice today. Today we're doing a hostful show to celebrate our 1 year milestone. But before we get to that, what's on your wrist, gentlemen?
Today I am wearing a watch. I just arrived a few days ago. The Venezianico Nereid Bronzo. It's kind of a golder tone bronze, more aluminum in it than I think copper in a lot of bronzes. This is going to be coming with me on a vacation soon, seeing a little bit of beach time next week, actually. Carousel.
Is that the same one that I reviewed for you, Brent?
No, that was the Redentore. So this is actually a similar color of bronze, I believe, but it's in a different collection.
Okay. Yeah, the Venezianico has a lot of collections. I think I mentioned that in the review. They've got a lot of watches.
They do, and they're very classy looking. Like even their divers look very much like dress divers, despite the good specs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, with the tungsten and everything. Yeah, good materials too. Good brand, really good brand.
Really good people behind the brand too.
Yeah, they're lovely. They're really lovely. This morning, I have also a really a nice brand with full of lovely people, and it's the Laco, and it's the Kiel 2 Blau, or in English, blue. And Mark, I know you like a big watch, and this is a big watch in a good way. I really like that sort of classic Flieger look that this one has, and it's got
it's really cool.
It's got the chronograph as well. Very nice.
Yeah. So I've got on my new to me Tudor Black Bay Pro in opaline dial. Now, I know I said that the Planet Ocean from Omega was the epitome of a dive watch, in my opinion, and pretty much at the pinnacle of where I was going to go with collecting. However, and Brent got to see it in hand a couple of weeks ago, it is a very heavy watch. It's big, yes, fine. 43 millimeters, I can handle that. It's no issue. I mean, I've worn 46. I mean, no issue there. But the weight and the way the bracelet's made, the clasp is very clunky. Like, it makes a lot of noise when you touch it, which bothered me. And the micro adjustment, I could dial it into a size that fit really nice. And then there was one night where I figured, let me wear it a little bit tighter just to see how it feels. And I woke up with wrist pain that lasted 3 weeks. I felt like I had arthritis. Like, it was, I'm old, but I'm not that old. And so I kind of started thinking, and also the reflections, that dial. I mean, it's great to have anti-reflective coating on the crystal, but if the dial is polished black, mirror black, it's reflecting the indices into itself off the back of the crystal, and it's insane. It was so difficult to photograph properly. It was difficult to, and you know what? I had the Black Bay Pro, and I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. I love a light colored dial, so I mean, the opportunity came up, and it just so happened to coincide with our event last week in Montreal. It was funny because at the end of the night, my friend was there, Sam, and he had brought his box. I brought my box too. It was in my car. And
I was also there.
Yeah, exactly. Bob was there.
Back alley deal go down, literally
in the back of the pub in the parking lot in the dark. We traded watches. So, anyways, that's what I'm wearing. So, let's start from the beginning. What did each of you guys think when I reached out to you guys for the podcast? What was your initial goal after you accepted to do the podcast? Was it to enhance your own brand, like to get more followers on YouTube, or to further the Calibrated Wrist? What do you guys think, Bob? What do you think?
My first actual thought was, how difficult is it going to be to actually meet on a regular basis? And I think it's been kind of handy that there's 3 of us, because when somebody's busy, vacation, sick, whatever, there's 2 guys to sort of fill in, so that's helped a lot. I think having a 3-man group, and it's worked out great. We haven't missed an episode yet. We've all missed episodes, but we haven't missed our schedule yet, and we all kind of roll with the punches a little bit. Even today we had some stuff come up and are doing this earlier than normal, so that part's all worked out. I think for the second question, everything kind of goes hand in hand. For me, the YouTube, the podcast, I do some work with Jason with our meetups. We all collaborate in different ways, exchanging watches, and it all just works together great. So yeah, I initially wasn't thinking about growing the YouTube necessarily through the podcast, but it all just jives together in the end.
It does help that we all live fairly close to each other.
Yeah.
Just to jump on what you just said, Bob, I think that the only time actually where it could only be one of us on the podcast was the time that Mark had to field the interview with Jody all alone.
Oh yeah.
You were gone, and then I got caught in the most ridiculous traffic coming out of Toronto. And I remember I was stopped on the side of the 401 so that I could help, boot things up, but I could not participate from there with an unreliable internet. But you're right. We've always made it work. There's always been a Monday morning podcast come out. So that's I guess that's an achievement in and of itself.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, I think Mark, you probably remember my biggest fear in the beginning was I just didn't have time. I wasn't sure that I could actually devote enough time to do it really well, and I like to do things really well. So that was probably my biggest concern, but there was this part of me that just really wanted to do it. I mean, I love podcasts. I listen to quite a few podcasts, and I thought, it would be fun to take a run at this. I had absolutely no goal in mind. And that's the truth. I had no idea, what would come of it, but I thought, hey, it would be really cool. Mark, you and I didn't know each other really, really well at the time either. We were kind of just like in touch sporadically on Instagram. And Bob, you and I had met a handful of times, but like we've become pretty good friends since then. And so for me, even though that wasn't necessarily a goal, it's been a really great offshoot of this, is that we've become a nice trio. We love to meet up together. It's, and we chat all the time. And my phone, my phone blows up when Mark gets an idea. So,
I was going to say, or if there's a release that he has feelings about, our phones explode too.
That never happens.
Feelings. Yes. How about you, Mark? What you were the one who proposed the idea in the first place?
Yeah, the whole podcast thing, it was an idea I've had for a long time, and I'll get into it a little bit later on. And reaching out to you guys honestly has been a joy. Finding the time to do the shows has been not very difficult. I mean, we've managed. I mean, we've done shows with like you said before with Jody, who's in Australia. So there's a 14-hour time difference. We had to do it late evening, and then we did a show with Archie Brower, who's in Europe, and we've had to accommodate times. What was very clunky at the beginning was just using Podbean for recording because of the software we had to ask people to download onto their phones, retrieving their own recording afterwards and having them email it to us or somehow. And sometimes Podbean would just cycle and just spin, and it wouldn't actually download the software, and you panic for a little while. So we got over that hump. But yeah, the friendships that we've developed, again, I'm going to get into that a little bit later on, but I'm very happy with this whole situation. And like Bob said, if one of us is down because of I'm in Greece or if one of you guys is sick, or if two of you guys are down, or two of us, if I'm down, whatever, we can always just do the podcast. We're at the point now where we're actually fairly comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel so bad about doing it by myself. That first time with Ricky was jarring for me because I don't have an on-camera personality. I don't have a like you guys are doing stuff on YouTube. You do all kinds of other stuff. That was, and Jody was someone that I watched a lot. Like I was a fan. I was a genuine fan. I was excited for his brand coming out, Erebus, and it was a cool experience. So our first show, obviously was a little bit clunky. We were getting our feet wet, and then we had our second show where we did some questions, and then out of nowhere, Brent pulled out of thin air an interview with oh god, I forgot the guy's name.
Alaz Obrist, yeah.
Yes, from Omega during the Olympics to talk about Olympic timing. I mean, I couldn't have been more fortunate. And then we had Mike Pearson come on and do an incredible interview with us. He gave us a lot of time, very generous. It was so cool. And then to follow that up right away with Ricky from Scottish Watches right before we went to the Toronto Timepiece show. I mean, we couldn't have started that any more perfectly. Yeah, so good fortune followed us, and then it was guest after guest after that. It was just a great time.
Yep,
Yeah.
for sure.
Like, I think, for example, like I look back on those early shows and I see that there are some technical things that obviously we've been working on for the last 26 episodes and just getting better, I think, with each one. But there's nothing that I am embarrassed about in those early shows. There's some great people. They've given great interviews. They've been engaging, etc. And it's just been, week after week when we have these interesting individuals on who are so deep into the niche that we're all interested in. It's more fun than anything else.
Yeah. It's been a learning curve though. Like I had some major nerves for the first couple of shows. And I think it was actually Mike Pearson that kind of that one sort of made me start feeling more comfortable just because he's so good to talk to. You could ask him a 2-word question and he'll take over he'll
Yeah.
talk for forever. I remember too, back when we first started, we didn't prep in quite the same way. And I don't know if we really prepped much at all other than some little notes here and there. So I think we've sort of developed a little bit of a framework to how we do the shows now. And it obviously veers away from that framework. It is right now, actually. But yeah, the learning curve, there's a learning curve, and then we are learning. We're still in the middle of the curve, but
it's a learning process, right?
Yeah.
If you're not learning every day, and then you're not living.
Yeah.
Mark, you just mentioned it, and even Bob, you can chime in further here. But your career prior to all this, Mark, was very much the written word, whether it was on forums or whether it was for magazines or for online magazines and everything. So I'm curious, like for you, what was it like to go public? Did you have any reservations or worries about stepping into this new medium, and maybe how do you feel now?
Yeah, I was quite nervous, just like Bob said, especially at the beginning. And you guys said said before, you have no regrets about things you've said. I have regrets. There's a couple of words at the beginning, especially on the intros where I hosted, where I mangled a word or it just came out of my mouth in such a strange way. Every time I listen to it, I cringed up. And I speak to Chris Antoulis, who also just started a podcast, and he's right. We hear it because we know us, and it's one word out of, I don't know, hundreds of words you're saying. So most people won't hear it, won't see these things. But I cringe, and I hate the sound of my own voice, except for this morning. For some reason, it sounds really good. But yeah, so I was nervous getting in front of the thing, and I'm still not comfortable doing the camera thing. I don't know. A learning process.
So I'm not sure what it is, but the Canadian watch community seems stronger than ever the last couple of years. I think the timepiece shows have played a big role in that. But it seems like there's so much happening now in Canada in an almost more organized way. There's new brands, content creators, the calibrated wrist is taking off. Do you guys get that same sense? And maybe I'll direct this one to you, Brent, since you're a little more out there at like a lot of events and stuff than us.
Well, it's interesting because I always wonder, is it because we're getting deeper into it that we just feel like it's that way, or is it truly actually manifesting itself at this moment? And it's probably a little bit of both, but I really do believe that that sort of if you build it, they will come attitude that Jason had about the timepiece shows has just brought everybody together. So you had these disparate groups across the country. You had your Red Bar Toronto's, your Red Bar Montreal's, you had little get-togethers out west, etc. But now suddenly there are these two events that kind of act like a magnet for everybody that's interested in those things. And you notice it because, when we were in Vancouver, you had people that were from Edmonton, that were all over sort of like the western part of Canada. And of course, us who'd come all the way from the east to be there. You had people from the Pacific Northwest in the United States. And I really think we're going to see the gestation of all of that in September, because I really anticipate this Toronto show to be quite large. Not
Oh
only
yeah.
is the venue bigger, not only are there more brands, but I think people are ready now and more people know about it. And there's been enough buzz and a groundswell so that we're really going to feel that then. So yeah, I do think you're right, Bob, that there is this all of a sudden a huge, not new interest, but a huge galvanization of all that interest.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said in an organized way. It just
Yeah.
feels more like it was all over the place a little bit before, but yeah, it's really coming together, and I do thank Jason for that, because I think that's a huge part in it. But so speaking of Jason, he actually is partly responsible for the podcast happening. Maybe Mark, you can talk about how Jason got us together. We were just talking about it the other day, and I know you were thinking of doing a podcast for quite a while beforehand. Was that something you were considering doing solo at a point, or?
Yeah, I've been a voracious podcast listener for almost 2 decades, and especially when I moved to this specific house in Saint Lazare like 17 years ago, 18 years ago. I have big property, so mowing the lawn was a long chore, it was like 3 hours. So I used
Mm.
to listen to podcasts while I'd mow, and then that became into listening to podcasts while I drive to work, commutes, doing the dishes, anything that's mindless. I'd listen to podcasts. And after a while, you think I can do that. I mean, listen to all these other guys, and some of them are terrible, and I can do better than that. So yeah, I thought of doing it myself. I had posted on Instagram a poll whether or not I should start a podcast, and I'd gotten a resounding yes. But again, I didn't really feel like doing it by myself. I didn't know who to partner with, and the idea of like a theme or whatever hadn't come to mind. And then as soon as I started writing again publicly on Warner Wound, I started gaining a little more public attention. I figured it was time, but again, I didn't want to do it alone. And one of the days, last spring, I think, or last summer, I was talking to Jason about the Toronto Timepiece show. Like, I was involved with him launching Xenia. He had helped me with my Canadian Watch Guild thing that I had tried to start. And I just threw it out there. I says, and I was thinking of doing something with someone Canadian, and I knew Bob's channel, and he had a bit of a following. So that could potentially help kick it off, fairly quickly. So I asked him, I says, do you think Bob would be interested in doing podcasts with me? He says, I think he would, but you should speak to Brent, because Brent's going to be retiring soon and he might have some time on his hands. Little did he know. But anyways, so yeah, I reached out to both of you guys. And the funny thing is between the time that I reached out and the time we started recording our first show, I mean, I think there was maybe 2 weeks. I mean, or even less than that. Like I had ordered a mic on Amazon. I think Brent, you did the same thing. And
Absolutely.
next thing you knew, we were sitting in front of these mics and recording. So, yeah, that's basically how it all started. Jason just nudged and then gave me the confidence to reach out to you guys, and yeah, it's been wonderful ever since.
Mm-hmm. I initially found the immediacy of podcasting to be somewhat intimidating, because like you, Mark, most of what I was doing prior to that was definitely written word. You get a chance to edit and think about it, stick it in a drawer figuratively, and then go back to it, etc. So when we first started recording, I would always have these little notes, even sometimes stickies, like they were all over the place. And although I still do notes to some extent, there are most mornings like this morning where I just sit down. And, we press record and away we go. I feel much more relaxed about it. What was it like for you guys?
For me, it kind of depends on the guest a little bit. Like some of the guests I know quite well, and I feel comfortable. I've had many conversations and I feel comfortable that it's just gonna be a nice flow. But there's other people that I maybe have never spoken with ever. And in those situations, I do tend to have a lot more prep work when it comes to notes and sort of questions that it kind of causes you to obviously do some research on a person or the brand they represent. But yeah, it's very much dependent on the guest. But again, I think having our little framework that we can lean on if things go sideways definitely helps a lot. And that's coming from now having a little bit of experience, I guess. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I was again really nervous at the very beginning. I don't think I was so nervous with a lot of the guests because they were friends of mine or people that I already knew, so it was fairly easy for me to get into them. What really made me not necessarily nervous but anxious was getting the outlines done, because as you know, I have a full-time job, and Thursdays is my office day where I'm away from my computer all day, and it's a lot of driving. So by the time I get home, I don't feel like touching the computer, getting involved or writing or anything like that. So if I don't get the outline before Wednesday, not that I'm imposing a deadline on you guys, and a lot of the times I'm the one writing the outline, so I don't even get to it until Thursday. Sometimes I do it at work. I'm not supposed to be doing that, but I do it at work. So that's what really makes me anxious. But once I've got the outline done and I'm very happy with it, then I feel like $1,000,000. I'm one of those people who like to over prepare for things. If I'm doing a presentation for work, I will rehearse, I will put notes, I will play out scenarios. I've always been like that. I grew up in the scout program. It will be prepared is our motto, and being over prepared. There's nothing like the feeling of being over prepared, and that's how I feel when we start these podcasts. Like today, I spent yesterday evening putting on my own notes for my own answers to these questions and making sure they don't forget things. And I feel really good about how this show is going to be because of that. Um, Sometimes winging it is great, and sometimes you drive off the script and just follow wherever the interview guest is going, and then ask spur the moment questions. But yeah, I think it's just a preparation. I really want us to be prepared, and we come off prepared, and I think we do a really good job of doing our research on our guests. I come up with questions that I think are going to be great, and then I see you guys come up with other questions that are even better, and they're like, oh shit, I didn't think of those. So I mean, it's been really good in that respect. So I know our original plan was to do mostly hostful episodes and be a voice of guiding new collectors and into watches and talking about our experiences and so forth. And then it eventually evolved from a hostful kind of show with occasional guests to a whole lot of guests in the occasional hostful show. Do you guys have any regrets of how that all turned out? Did you guys want it to be something else? I mean, I sort of turned it into a guest show. I mean, that's kind of my fault, but what do you guys think?
I have zero regrets with it personally. There hasn't been a guest that we've had that I haven't learned from and enjoyed the conversation with, and a lot of them I spoke about people that I hadn't spoken to before ever. Are friends of mine now, so I have absolutely zero regrets, and I'm really glad it's gone this way for sure.
Yeah,
What about?
I have to echo that. Like, I mean, I do think that it would be fun to do these occasional hostful ones with topics and themes and things like that. But
Yeah.
to be honest, I really look forward to the mornings where we have somebody, particularly somebody maybe I don't know very well.
Hmm.
But the amazing part is that some of them are just so professional and so good at what they do and so knowledgeable that they put you at ease, even if you are a little bit intimidated coming into it. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I think it's a great direction, and I hope we continue down that vein.
Yeah, I agree with that. The guests have been wonderful. Honestly, we've been so unbelievably blessed with the quality of the guests. And just like you said, the minute the first question is asked and you get this wonderful answer, it just completely disarms us, and then we feel comfortable the entire rest of the way. Um, I remember Adam Craniotis. I knew him from being online, and I knew of him. I didn't know him very well, and before we started, he was very jokey, and I was wondering how this was going to turn out. And boy, what a wonderful interview that became!
Yeah.
And he's become a great friend. Like we chat all the time on DMs and stuff. So yeah, it's true.
So we've talked a little bit about collection goals in the past. Maybe we could chat a little bit about goals or watches you'd like to pick up between now and the second anniversary. For me, one that's on my mind that I recently had some time with is the 417 ES Flyback, and actually also the 415 ES Iconic. Probably slightly lean towards a flyback, but a hand heart chronograph is something I'd like to add to the collection this year. Do you guys have any goals in that way at all for the year?
Well, you and I would be twins in that desire, actually, Bob. Like honestly, that flyback, that heritage flyback, really is a beautiful watch, and it's such a value proposition when you consider what you're getting with it as well. But then they released that reverse Panda of the 415 ES, and now oh no, what do I do? I love both of those watches, so I haven't had hands on with the second one yet. So when it comes in for a review and some photography, maybe I'll make my decision then. But I think like you, it's going to be a hand heart for sure. I do have a couple of others that are incoming. I won't mention them today. When they come in, we'll talk about them on the show. But yeah, I have a couple that are coming this year, and and then people say this all the time, and I say this all the time. But I don't know that there'll be a whole lot after that. There's going to probably be a purge this year as well. But yeah, the Hand Heart's definitely high on that list. It's a great watch.
Yeah, so Felix is paying you guys, right? He's gonna be happy after he hears this.
That's right.
I remember when we started the podcast, I had said that I was going to become a multiple watch guy, and for the most part, I succeeded. I've owned several watches at the same time, but I always just wear the one watch 24/7, and the others just stay in their case. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I wore my Grand Seiko, which is my beloved 50th birthday watch, which is a shame. I should be wearing that thing, but for some reason it's on the wonderful winder that Brent gave me and it's behind me. But I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Right now I'm pretty content with what I have. I love my Tudor. Again, it's a little strange because it's a watch I just recently had and I remember how much I loved it. So it's like a coming back home, and I've been very lucky over the years. I've never owned the same watch twice. No, I've owned the same model, maybe with a different color or an updated version, but I've
Yeah.
never had the exact same watch twice, which is kind of cool. Now, if I was something that I really wanted, there's a watch that I've been curious about for a long, long time, and I've never gotten an opportunity to see them. And hopefully, now that I'm going to U.S. Shows, maybe I'll run into them. It's the Oscar Humboldt GMT with the white dial.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That I've always been curious about. The quality apparently is phenomenal. Chase, I believe, is the owner of the brand. Seems to be like a really cool dude, and I've chatted with him many times on DMs. Hopefully, I get a chance. If I have a little extra spending money, I might actually go ahead and get one of those. I've always been curious. I love their second hand. For some reason, an extra long second hand, especially one with a long tail. I just love the way it looks when it's going around the dial, and the way Chase has designed it. The logo that's on the tail of the watch eclipses a logo that's on the dial printed as it's turning around, and it's just really, really well designed and thought out. And these little things, little details. But having said all of that, all it takes is squirrel. And there's another watch that I'm interested in. So
that's my problem too.
Yeah,
My
so we'll see.
exact problem.
So how has your perception of podcasting changed over the last 26 episodes? I've had a romantic idea in my head of how podcasting was, based off of listening to This American Life and, Stuff You Should Know and The Moth and all this other stuff that I listen to. So my perception has changed because of the amount of detail we do on the back end and preparation. What about you guys? How has it changed?
I think it's not as easy as it looks. I've learned. There's the technical side, which we're getting the hang of now. We would always almost have some sort of technical difficulties in the first few, and we still do. A lot of guests aren't doing this on a regular basis either. So there's always echoes and little fixes that need to be dealt with still. It can be us too. Last episode, Marc recorded with everything plugged into a battery pack during a power outage.
Oh yeah.
Brent has actually, you weren't able to that time, but you mentioned, but you did do an episode from your car.
I did.
If I'm not, you did an episode.
We did
from
an interview with Jason Hutton. Yeah.
I did it from a small bedroom at the back of our cottage, right next to the router to get a decent signal. When you and I did the Mito, Marc was in Greece, I think.
Yeah.
So I think the being able to roll with the punches is very important when doing podcasts. I've learned.
Adapt and overcome.
Yeah, exactly.
There's that line in Wizard of Oz where they say, "Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain," and that's a little bit like people understood, I suppose. Like I know that I was doing the sound for a while, and now Marc has taken over that mantle. But if people heard what it sounds like before the editing is done, before the awkwardness or the moments that we don't like to have pop up are taken out, I think people would be so surprised, just how much actual tweaking and things go on. And then it comes out sounding, really well most times. So definitely, I would echo that again. That it's you don't realize just how much work goes into even a straightforward three guys talking episode.
Yeah. It's a lot easier when it's 3 versus 4 or 5. But yeah, agreed. The back end stuff, learning how to edit, properly has been a challenge. I had no experience doing it before. You guys have edited video before, and then probably some audio content as well. Thankfully, Brent was helpful in guiding me into where to do, what to do, and so forth. I also I can't stress enough how much going from Podbeam to recording in a studio on Podcastle has changed how we do this.
For sure.
I'm the one who used to convince guests to download that app and then walk them through how setting it up and how to make sure that the phone allows the app to use the microphone so that it wouldn't be bounced out. And that remember that we did with Jody. Jody got on and he didn't have that permission set on his phone. We didn't know that needed to be done. So he'd log on, it'd bounce him up, log on, he'd bounce him out. And we were maybe a half an hour trying to figure out what the problem was. And he had to use his wife's iPad to log in and boy, it was a pain in the ass. And then again, for them to download the recording, and because they're doing most of the talking on these episodes, it's a pretty big file. So they'd have to Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever to get us that portion of the track that we needed. But yeah, this is much better. Podcastle has been great. It's got its own video. Oh, that's another thing. We used to have people go on a Google Meet to see each other, and then we only had an hour on the Google Meet. So if we putzed around setting up and talking at the beginning before recording, we'd lose 10, 15 minutes of that. So the video would cut out before we were finished the podcast. And I always worried about the guest going, oh, is it over? And then, having to edit that out. And so
that's just because we're cheap.
Yeah.
Well, we're paying for Podcastle. It's not very expensive, but we're paying for Podcastle, and so for the most part, it's doing a really good job.
Well, you're right. When you have the right tools, it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
Do I probably owe you guys money for Podcastle. I haven't sent you guys.
No, it's coming up in July.
We know where you live. We know where you live.
Let me know. Let me know.
Don't we have some of his watches? We're good.
Yeah.
So are there any standout moments for you guys over the last 26 episodes that really, meant something to you guys, or that shocked you or surprised you?
I don't know if I'm answering a later question with this, but certainly you guys mentioned it earlier, that sort of impromptu opportunity to interview Alain Zobrist. That was like, but even for me, out of the blue, when Omega reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And originally wasn't even meant for the podcast because we didn't really have a podcast at that moment. I don't even think we'd maybe done our first episode, or maybe we only had one episode. I can't remember exactly, but when it was supposed to be a write-up, so and a profile that was done on the calibrated wrist. And so I just happened to record it, but on my phone. I mean, I knew nothing about those kinds of things at the time. And when I sort of put it into our new software that we had and cleaned up the audio, it wasn't all that bad. So, that was just kind of like a really special thing that occurred. I'm really glad that it happened. He was awesome. And just for me having hit record on voice notes on my phone. So I did really, really like that. And then another moment was the episode that you and I did, Bob, about Mito, just because I had such a great time at that cliff diving event and everything. So I was glad that we were able to share that a little bit with people, etc. So those would be some of the events that sort of like stand out. And then I guess we're going to talk about guests later, but those were really cool.
Yeah, that Alain Zobrist thing, I remember vividly. So you guys know I work in Johnstown, Ontario. So it's about an hour and a half, an hour and 45-minute drive to get home, right? And I stop at Tim Hortons for coffee on the way and all that stuff. So I remember getting on a call with the two of you guys, and then Brent was all excited. He says, I got an opportunity to speak to and we're gonna put it, and it's Omega. I remember being so excited about that. How it fell into our laps thanks to Brent and the calibrated wrist work. Boy, oh boy, was that amazing! Like, it just we couldn't have asked for better. The timing, again, Olympic timing. The timing was just perfect.
Yeah, that's a huge one for me too. Like, that was really like. It's 2 episodes in, and it's like the turning point. Kind of our, you know what I mean? Like, happened really quickly. So many highlights for me are to do with our conversations when either of you will chime into the text group with a guest that blows me away. I can't believe this person is willing to come on. And there's a ton of people that gave us a chance very early on. Mike Pearson was super early too, a
Mhm.
great guest. The other another kind of a standout thing with not to do with particular episodes is one of my favorite things is the in-person time with you guys that has been happening kind of more and more regularly now. Love going out to shows and see you and the team do your work for the Calibrated Wrist. Marc's now with Isotope and watching him and his excitement for the brand and just watches in general. It's just different in person. You know what I mean? These guys have found out I'm a hugger. I give them both great big bear hug every time I see them. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of really cool standout moments for me. During the Ariel Adams interview, which is going swimmingly, and Ariel is a wonderful guest, and he's a professional, and he's been doing this for a long time. There's one moment where we asked him a question. I don't even remember what the question was, but Ariel started on talking about how he started his passion between moving from being a lawyer to full-time working watches and his story with his dad.
Mhm.
And I remember looking at Brent like giant saucer eyes. We're looking at each other like, "Holy crap, this is gold!" And it was such a wonderful story. That really hit home to bring something to audience that probably has never heard him talk like that. You know, he's usually the one doing the interviewing, right? And I've seen him being interviewed, but I don't think anybody ever got that story out of him. Or if they did, I didn't hear it. But I think it was wonderful. He was such a great guest. And the other moment that really meant some or stood out to me, it was with our interview with RJ Brower from Fratello, and it was a story that we did not record. It was after we finished and we were saying goodbye, and then he just came out with this story of how the origin of the Speedy Tuesday watch, because he had a relationship with an actual astronaut, and that he had bought an X-33 from. That after he passed away, his widow had his son come over with a bag of watches that RJ was going to look at, and he just dumped the bag upside down on his desk, and a Speedy came out that RJ had never seen. And we're talking Mr. Speedmaster here.
Mhm.
So for him to have found a watch that he'd never seen before was stunning to him. And then he reached out to Omega and found out that it was a very limited production watch that he was not supposed to have because it still belonged to the agency that it was issued to, kind of thing. I mean, it was a great story. I wrote it up and put it on our Discord channels for our listeners to go and read and get the full story. So if anybody's ever interested, just reach out and we'll give you a link to the Discord. But yeah, that really, I mean, these are the kind of behind the scene things or stories we should have recorded. You see, if we had been using Podcastle, we could have just hit record again and they would have recorded that. But we weren't at the time. But yeah, those are my two that stand out for me.
Did you guys ever listen to an episode after it's gone live and think, oh, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I'd asked this, or maybe worse, I can't believe I said that?
Yeah, I've got a few. I can't believe I said that, and I've got a few. Like I said before, I flubbed some words, especially at the beginning. You know, I'm French Canadian, right? So I'm bilingual, and oftentimes I think in English. I speak better English. I'm more fluent in English. But every once in a while, I'll pronounce a word that's a little weird. And at the very beginning, there's a couple. And it's the beginning of the show, and it's like my fifth or sixth word, and it's blah. Kills me. But for the most part, I'm very, very happy with the way everything's turned out. You know.
What about you, Bob?
Yes, 100% for me. I trip over words all of the time, but it's like you mentioned, it's the questions that you don't ask because everything's so fluid. We have a person for an hour. And then it seems like the second you're off of the recording, you're like, I should have asked this one.
Yeah.
And the other big one is the stuff we have missed, because almost every time we have somebody, we have a little few minutes to kind of chat, just to make them get comfortable with each other. And then the few minutes afterwards we're chatting. We've should have had that record button going on many different occasions, really, almost every time. But yeah.
One of the shows that I listened to way back was called the Nerdist. And they would start recording when the guest sits down without telling the guest. And then they'd be like 10 minutes in the conversation and the guest would say, "Are we recording?" And yeah, we were recording at the beginning. Maybe that's something we should do too. Like it just, the intro would start the music and then it would just have us talking and no intro.
Yeah.
Nah, maybe not. But
I
I don't know.
remember like it was Chris Sally, I think, that we were speaking to for, I don't even know, maybe 10 minutes before we got started. And even he said, man, we should have hit record on this, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And of course the RJ Brower story is, yeah, like that's a regret not to have actually put that on tape for sure. But I think ultimately for me, there's nothing really that I regret maybe having said, but there's that one moment with Alexandre Voirin where I thought that he had mentioned that he was with Kate Winslet at Longines picking those things out. But it happened so fast, and there was that little bit of a language barrier, and you guys didn't pick up on it either. So I thought, well,
Mhm.
I was not right about that. And then, sure enough, listening to it back afterwards, I thought, I can't believe we didn't follow up on that story about
I
Kate
know, that
Winslet.
kills me.
Me too.
That's the worst of one of them
I
all,
told him
probably.
that.
Yeah.
Like he and
Yeah.
I chat still on WhatsApp all the time. Like he's a fan and he always comments on our stuff, and I repost his pictures as often as I can, and to help him out launch Carlang, and hopefully he comes to Toronto show or maybe next year. I'm not sure, but anyways, yeah, I did tell him that. I says, look, I didn't hear it personally.
I
It
didn't
must.
either.
And after I listened to the recording, I'm like, holy crap! We could have asked him about Leo DiCaprio. We could have asked him about Titanic. We
Yeah.
could have asked him because this all like we could have would yeah,
But it's
Kate
funny
Winslet.
because
I
like
mean,
I've been in those rooms in Longines that he was talking about where they have all that stuff, and I can't, like, they're so small. Like there's a lot of stuff in there, but the room is really small. So I can't like imagine how just an interesting and intimate moment that would be with somebody who's there, who's not really necessarily into watches herself, but is there picking things out. And he's just like, yep, we'll do that. We'll do that. And she's looking through stuff that's hundreds of years old, 160 some years old, 190 years old sometimes, like,
yeah,
so pretty cool.
yeah.
Pretty cool.
So, have there been any standout guests? Like, have you have any favorites other than Zobrist, which we already mentioned? Has there been like a favorite guest so far?
I don't like to make
Mhm.
a list about favorites, but I'll tell you people that just made it so easy. Like you could basically just wind them up and let them go. We've talked about Mike Pearson. I think that guy could make the phone book sound interesting. He's just so good at what he does. But so is Adam and Ariel. They're both just excellent speakers and they have great stories. They've been around the industry for a long time. So those are ones at least that I was part of that I found, wow, this is really easy. And Ricky probably would be another one that I would add to that, who was just so professional and you just had to sort of stand back and let them do their thing.
One that I feel might go under the radar a little bit, that was such a pro was Marshall from Wristwatch
Oh
Revival.
yeah, he was
Man,
wonderful.
could he
Brilliant.
tell a good story. And he's does broadcasting for the Dungeons and Dragons thing.
No,
So
no,
he's
no, no,
is
no.
it not
He's
Dungeons and Dragons?
no, it's Magic the Gathering.
Magic the
Amazing.
Gathering.
Yeah.
He'll kill you
Right.
now that you
I know.
confuse
Sorry,
them because
sorry, Marshall. Mar
those two camps don't get along.
edit this out, please.
Yeah, that's a regret for me that I did not get to play a role in that particular one. That's one of those ones that I missed. But yeah, what a
His
great
stories were
episode that turned
incredible.
out to be. Oh,
Yeah. My standout, and because a great friendship has come out of it, is Mike Pearson. He gave us a lot of time, and coming on the very, very beginning was huge for us. And I got to learn more about his career, about Christopher Ward that I didn't know about, and ever since that, I mean, I had met him before the a couple weeks before the Toronto show, and the recording. He's become such a great friend. I mean, we chat all the time, and every time I see him, it's a huge bear hug, and it's how you've been, and it's not necessarily about watches. And we've had the opportunity, Brent and I, to have beers with him at the marathon event last year. He's just such a great dude. I mean, he's a consummate professional, and boy, is he knowledgeable and passionate, and so much energy. But man, that interview with um, actually all of them. I mean, every single guest, every time we've had an interview show, I always come out feeling like this is the best one we've ever done,
yeah.
or
We
this is the
always
best one
text
we've ever
each other
done.
immediately afterwards.
Yeah,
Wasn't that
how
great?
great was that? How wonderful was that? How amazing were these guests, or how amazing was this conversation? Do you remember that story? How incredible we got that on tape. They were all fantastic. I mean, yeah, it's been great.
Oh yeah.
Have any of the guests made you nervous?
For me, actually, one guest that made me the most nervous was Mike Pearson, because he was our first live guest. But the nervousness went away literally immediately talking to him before we even hit the record button. I just having that first live guest and his energy level to try to even attempt to match,
Yeah.
it can bring the nerves on too. So yeah, it was him, but again, he put me at ease very quickly though in that episode.
For me, definitely, Alain Zobrist was nerve-wracking because we had very little time, and he was in the thick of the Olympics, and so I knew I couldn't waste his time. So I wanted to make sure my questions were good and that I was prepared. That I was hoping there wouldn't be any internet issues and all that kind of stuff. So that went really well. And I should probably also just thank Chris Hollenrake, who comes from Rake PR. He's the guy that works with Omega here in Canada, and he's the one who sort of set that all up, and that was a real boon for us. But I was definitely nervous for it. But the other ones that made me the most nervous are people that do what I do, but have been doing it for a longer period of time. So RJ Broer, Zach Weiss, and Ariel Adams, for example. Those guys, because they're at the top of their game. They're running some of the best watch media out there. So they were intimidating. But again, immediately upon starting the show, that all disappeared.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
Usually I'm not really nervous talking to people. I've never been really starstruck. I mean, the only time that I really was starstruck was when I interviewed Clive Cussler 20 something years ago. And I was a kid. I was 26 years old, and I'd been reading his books, and it was a huge moment for me. But at the minute they start talking, they're just another dude, right? And or dudette, because we had, Lucy on, and she was a wonderful guest as well. And but yeah, and I don't think I've really ever been nervous with guests yet. And hopefully, I got some. We're going to get to a question that Brent's going to ask in a minute. There are some guests that would likely make me nervous.
Well, let's ask that right now. So would either of you guys, or do either of you guys, have that dream guest or guests that you'd like to have on?
You go ahead, Marc.
Yeah, I've got a couple. So one of them would be Jean-Claude Bivet, the man behind Blancpain, Hublot. Now he has got his own brand called Bivet. This man, to me, represents the essence of cowboy watchmaking. I told Bob a story the other day. When he got into Blancpain, when it first started, he came out with a tagline of "There's never been a quartz Blancpain, there never will be." And the brand was somewhat dormant, wasn't doing much, and he wanted to revive it. And he went to Basel Fair with a table and no watches, and just BS'd his way through meetings. I mean, the balls on that man. And just his stories are incredible. And I don't know if you've ever watched any interviews or listened to him, his passion, his knowledge, his excitement is infectious. I mean, he's just an incredible dude. He did a presentation when the first Tag Heuer connected watch came out. And because he was involved in that, he was with Tag Heuer at the time, and for a very short stint. And he came out with this big wheel of cheese that he had connected to the Swiss watch industry, and he was trying to cut the big thing of cheese, and he was being funny at the same time. And man, oh man, selfishly, for me, I want to talk to this guy, and if we can record it, that'd be great. Another guest, and it's someone that I've been trying to get for months, is a Canadian astronaut, Chris Hadfield.
Yes.
Now, I've seen him wear Omegas all the time. He obviously was issued one for his space missions and all that stuff, and generally seems like such a great guy. And I'd reached out to his camp, and his chief of staff has been communicating with me, and I've been following up with her every couple of months, just politely, jokingly, how's your summer going? How's your winter? How was Christmas? And this and that. And she's been so lovingly polite with me and giving me the time of day. And she's, Chris has launched a book. He's really busy, blah, blah, blah. But she hasn't forgotten about me, and I'm due for an email. So I'm going to send her another email, and hopefully the squeaky wheel will get the oil, and we can get a guest on. My goal eventually is to start getting guests that are outside our little sphere, right? Mike Pearson is an amazing person and is a great guest for us. But if it's someone who's just outside of the watch sphere, or someone that's just collected tags and Rolexes and stuff, but is some part, interest in watches, they won't know who Mike Pearson is. They won't care that he worked at Zodiac or on a cruise line selling watches and other stuff. If we get Chris Hadfield, then someone who might be a space nut, who might have an appreciation for Omegas, might tune in and listen and be entertained by our jokes or our interview and the guests themselves. So hopefully maybe get a little outside of that. And then the last dream guest would be to get Geddy Lee from Rush.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Now, Dan Tannenbaum, who's Watch Parts Motorcycles on Instagram, is a friend. I think we all met him at the Toronto Timepiece show.
Yeah.
He was there.
Yeah.
So he's a good friend. And he had a charity auction last year because one of his sons has Crohn's disease and some other complications. And so he had done a charity auction of some of his sculptures, and people donated some watches. Jason donated a Zenny or two for it, and Geddy Lee donated a handful of watches of his own personal collection for that thing. So he has a personal collection. I spoke to Dan. Look, I get it. He doesn't want to use that connection and say, "Hey, my buddy wants to do podcast." He doesn't want to do that. I get it, but that would be a dream. I've DM'd him, on Instagram a couple of times. But Geddy Lee, I've been a Rush fan since I was a little kid. I mean, I remember being in grade school and carving out the Rush symbol onto my school desk, which I'm not supposed to do, but I did that. So that'd be a dream guest. Those are my three that I'd kill to have.
I was gonna mention the Chris Hadfield if you didn't, because I know you've been working on that for a while, and that would be absolutely amazing. But it's so weird. I have two, and one of them is absolutely insane. I was reading an article, and I wouldn't even have thought of this, but I was reading an article in, I can't remember what publication, and I was sort of clicking through a few different articles, and I found one on Charlie Sheen and his Patek collection. How crazy would that be? So this is just totally shooting for the stars, but I think that'd be hilarious and wild to have somebody like that to that level on. Here's another one that's a little bit more down to earth, but not totally. So with this being a Canadian-based podcast, I'm a huge hockey fan. How about Sidney Crosby? He's a shareholder now, brand ambassador for Norcane. It'd be cool to chat watches and hockey with him. I'm a big fan of the brand too, so I think that'd be a lot of fun. So that would be, it's not realistic, but a little bit more than
It's actually, it might not be totally unrealistic. I'm friends with Catlin, who's a brand manager for Arcane.
Yeah.
And, maybe not Sidney Crosby, but possibly Roman Yossi, who's the captain of the Nashville Predators, who's one of the main shareholders of Arcane.
The other guy is Marc Streit.
And Marc Streit played for Montreal as well. Yeah, he's Swiss.
And he actually played, I think he played with the Penguins when Crosby was winning the cups too.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So any of those three would be fantastic.
Side note, you guys ever see the video of Robert Downey Jr. talking about his watch collection?
I don't think so.
Oh, you got to go look at that. He's literally sitting in a chair in a hotel room. He's got his collection with him. And he's talking about a watch, and then he just tosses it on the bed. Like, this is Jaeger LeCoultre I got from way back. It's worth this much. And he just throws it on the bed and grabs another one. It's like, holy cow.
Well, for me, I'd like to actually have Adrian Barker on the show. I think he would be an excellent
I reached out
guest.
to him.
Oh, did you? I didn't even know that. But I think that he's just so down to earth and no BS. And, because a lot of the times in the industry, people have to be careful because of their affiliations and everything and that sort of thing. But I don't think that he ever, has to worry about that because he's just so big. He's a juggernaut in and of himself that even negative news from him is good news for a brand. So I think he'd be an excellent guy to have on for sure. But here's another one. And because Mark, you were saying people that are outside our little sphere, and I would like to have Alicia Newman on. She's Canada's pole vaulter. She won bronze at the Olympics. The
Rado,
that's right. And so she's just recently become the official ambassador of Rado. And the interesting thing is that I met her, not last December, but the December before, down in Miami at Art Basel when they were launching the original Anatom. And my daughter was with me there at the time. She was helping me do an interview with Adrian Bassal, the CEO. And we ended up staying at the same hotel together. We were sort of on the Team Canada from Rado together. So, we had some meals together, and she's really interesting. And she's got a whole other career planned for once this pole vaulting is done. In fact, I believe that she thought she was going to retire after Paris, but now she's just hitting her stride. And so she's going to go to the next Olympics as well. But I think, she's got acting in the docket, I think, and she's got some really cool stuff that she'd like to do with sort of talking to young people about motivation and ambition and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think she'd be a really interesting thing, because there's obviously that big Canadian connection as well. And I always
And you
wanted to
can use
know.
your Alain Zobrist connection, saying, "I know the guy who does the timing for
That's
your
right,
events.
that's
You
right.
got to come on our podcast."
You start working on getting her on. I'll start working on getting Sheen on, and we'll see who
Okay.
comes on first.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So after 26 episodes and all this time, would you do it all over again?
Of course.
Oh yeah.
It's become a part of what I do, or what we do. Uh, uh, I absolutely love our time together. But again, both the prep time ahead and discussions ahead of episodes, recording the episode itself, and it's something that I'm personally really proud to be a part of. So definitely for me, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to say ditto, because yeah, for sure. There've been moments where I was tearing my hair out for the time, and like we should be clear, we're not just talking about the time it takes us to sit down. That's the easy part sometimes. It's the time that you got to put into the back end. It's the time that you got to put in afterwards and editing and things. But in the end, it's ultimately a joy. So yeah, I want to see that continue forth, and I would absolutely do it all over again.
Yeah, same here. I can't add anything to that. That's I feel the exact same way. And where do you guys see the podcast going?
Well,
you
Charlie
go
Sheen
ahead.
and Alicia Newman.
Yeah, exactly.
And Getty Lee from Rush. There we go.
So get on that, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to see it keep growing. I think we're on the right track, and the more we do it, the better it'll get. We've talked about dream guests, and I'm looking forward to having more and more great quality guests, whether they're ultra famous people or not. It's just a lot of fun.
Well, one other thing that I would add about that is that I would like to see a community grow up around the podcast, and it has begun a little bit. Like when we're together at gatherings and people say, I was listening to the pod, or I love that interview you did with so and so. I would like to see us do maybe meetups and sort of sponsor the idea, not just of our of our podcast itself, but like building a community around that. And Mark, you've already done a great job with Discord, and I've been on there a couple of times now, and I intend to sort of really dig deep into there over the summer, because I can see that now there's other people that have come on, and so I think that's a really good start as well, just where people can share ideas and commiserate and celebrate and all those kinds of things. Because we've said it all the time, we've said it over and over. Yeah, it's about watches, but really it's about people. And there's no more fun way than to share your passion together and get to know people. And as we've found out over the years, they're mostly just really good people. So yeah, that's what I like to see.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that growing the community, our own little community inside our space, is important. We've realized that, and we were successful last week at getting a gathering going for the Watches and Scotches event sponsored by Elon Solutions. Nothing can stopping us from doing the exact same thing for our podcast and reaching out to, and it was all promoting on Instagram. I reached out to 3 different Facebook groups, in Montreal-based Facebook groups. One of them has 1,200 members, and a few of them showed up, and then everyone had an amazing time. That event was better than anything we had done previously with last 3 Red Bar events, which were not very good. It was a really, really good event, and now the buzz is out.
Yeah, the energy level in that crowd was awesome, man. I actually just spoke with Richard, that sort of helped us with things there, and he's lined up a similar venue to do it in Ottawa.
Yeah, I know that place.
So Yeah, like honestly, like I put that totally into your hands, Mark, and you like killed it with the venue, getting the bodies out there, everything. Like that was an amazing time.
Yeah, Jason Hutton joked afterwards that he felt like Mike Pearson at the Christopher Ward booth. There was 4 or 5 people deep at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it
yeah.
was pretty amazing.
So I feel like we've achieved a lot with the podcast and other watch related things we're involved in this past year. Do you have any goals you're targeting for year 2, podcast related or not podcast related?
Well, I mean, not podcast related. I think we really want to grow the print magazine. We had a really great launch of the first issue. We've got some amazing stuff coming up for the second issue, and in fact, I'm probably going to be in touch with you guys outside the podcast this week about roles I'd love for you to play in that issue as well. So
Okay.
we really want to grow that. Absolutely. I think I want to get out to some watch shows that I've never been to before. I don't know what it'd be like. Milano Watch Week or maybe Dubai Watch Week or something, but I just want to see what it's like further afield, you know, because there are these traditional areas where we're constantly going. Bob, you're often over at like the British area. We go to all the Canadian stuff. We've been to some stuff in Geneva, but I definitely like to try some other stuff to see what the rest of the world is liking and wearing and saying about watches. So I think that would be a lot of fun.
That's kind of one for me too. And actually, it's not official yet, but I think I'm going to be making the trip to Singapore in October for Spring Sprang Sprung. I have a lot of good connections with brands I work with there, and I'd like to sort of hang out, meet them in person, make a trip out of it too. So that's sort of a one of the goals for me as well.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, should be fun.
Yeah, as far as the podcast is concerned, again, we talked about getting guests outside of our industry, but Brent and I had supper in Brockville a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about maybe even doing shows with smaller independent brands. Not necessarily startups, but people have, you know, a journey to talk about and watches that are different or interesting, right? And so we're going to start doing some of those as well. It doesn't have to be heavy hitters every single time, right? People inside our own, we can't ignore our own audience, right?
Right.
These are watch collectors that are probably interested in finding out what, you know, Jose Sermano, how he started and why, and why leather and all this other stuff. So we're gonna have him on in a couple of weeks. So that's gonna be great.
Yeah.
There's a couple of really cool, more than a couple. There's a lot of really cool stories out there with some of these brands.
Yeah.
There's a brand that I am about to be working with called Helicon watches.
Yeah, Jonathan, I had a video chat with him a few weeks ago, just out of nowhere. We just decided to talk to each other live, and then we talked about all kinds of things. I mean, he's been in the watch business for a long time.
Yeah, he's done some really neat stuff in the watch business, and he would be one of those guys that's easy to chat with. He'll fill up the dead air without any problem at all.
Yeah. He can vacuum this.
And he's a good storyteller. He's a really good storyteller. Yeah.
Yes, he is. Now, outside of the podcast, I'm really excited about growing Isotope. We've got some really cool watches. I gave Brent a glimpse of some of the designs that are coming around the corner, and there's some things that are going to be really wild. And the OVNI, when it finally launches, will be huge for us. I've already got 3 or 4 people bugging me almost daily about when that's coming out. And Jose says he's probably got 20 takers already as it is. So I can't wait. I'm going to be going to different shows. Obviously, I'm going to be traveling to the US. I'm going to Los Angeles at the end of the month to go to Minutes and Hours, which is really cool. We're going to be doing a show in Philadelphia. We're probably going to do something in New York. If we're not attending Windup, we're going to do something in New York, either with Red Bar or something else to get the people in that area involved. We're going to go to Austin in November, 2 Hours and Minutes and Intersect. The shows are on the same weekend, so we're going to split up. We're going to do one show each on the Saturday and then join together on the Sunday for Minutes and Hours. So that's really exciting. The opportunity with Isotope is tremendous. I just can't wait for the future with him. Jose is wonderful. You guys know him so well.
Yeah.
It's such a great opportunity. Now, moving on, we have some questions and comments from some listeners. And remember, I talked about this show I used to listen to called Nerdist, and they would take questions and comments from guests, and oftentimes at live shows, and they would call them Quements because it's not a question, it's not a comment, it's a Quement. So we've got some Quements from our listeners. One of them being, believe it or not, Devin Pennypacker, Morning Wound's media manager. He says, I'd be curious to hear your take on lessons learned from starting a podcast from scratch and keeping the wheels on for a year despite different schedules and responsibilities. Congrats on hitting the 1 year mark.
Hmm.
So I'll go ahead and start off. So yeah, thanks, Devin, for asking the question. I haven't worked for you in a while, but you're a good friend and really happy you reached out. So lessons, obviously the technical ones were pretty profound, like making sure our tracks were recorded separately.
Yeah.
We didn't know that at the beginning. We were working off of one track with all of our voices, so cleaning that up was very difficult. And it's funny because the way we found out about the separate tracks was at the marathon event in Toronto Timepiece Show, and we were talking to James Stacy, and he says, "You guys are recording separate tracks, right?" They're like, "What?"
Of course we are.
Who doesn't?
Exactly. Yeah, as one does. So yeah, that was a lesson, and then immediately that improved the quality of our show, the sound quality dramatically. So that was like 3 or 4 shows in. And then moving from Podbean, I said it before, to having a recording studio on Podcastle is huge for editing purposes. The files are all there. Don't have to share. Don't have to send. Don't have to and don't have to ask a guest to download something on their phones, and they're recording on their phones. Some people like Ariel Adams has a recording studio. They have probably the best equipment available, and we're going to force them to work off their iPhone or whatever. So, but he was cool. He actually downloaded his own recording of his own thing and sent it to us, and we mashed it. I don't know how Brent did that, but anyways, we did all that, and then the editing process. I'm actually quite happy that I'm doing the editing now. It taking some lift off of Brent's shoulders. He's very busy with his own media empire and events, and he's got kids that are in Toronto, so he's constantly traveling all over the place. So taking that off of his shoulders, I think, has helped him a great deal. And to be frank, I am a control freak, and I know I got to work on it, but so I kind of like having that. And Bob too is got his own. He too has a full-time job and does countless stuff for YouTube and has his own editing and content creating. So I think that the tasks are properly shared now. And I think it's easier for Brent to just pop on and be part of the show as opposed to having to worry about, we record on Friday mornings and having that done before he leaves for Toronto on Friday evening. And then the weekend he's spending with his kids. And I think this is the better way to go. So what about you guys?
Well, I do believe that we've definitely worked out a good schedule, and like Bob said earlier, a good template, and that now the responsibilities have kind of fallen in a good and manageable way, for sure. So I think it took a year almost for that to all fall into place, but I mean, that's the learning process. But yeah, I would say that's exactly true.
And I think that having the trio has, like we mentioned already before, with the vacations and whatever, has been clutch too. That's really helped us, like, to sort of maintain the schedule. So yeah, that's been big for sure too.
Yeah, agreed. Having the 3 of us to lean on has been huge. Now we got a comment from Chris Sansoulis, our friend from Popping Crowns and writer for Watch Gecko, who just incidentally wrote a review of the Isotope Moonshot. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. It is not a review. He wrote a story in the style of science fiction and, really encapsulated the thought behind the watch. And he did a wonderful job. And he's such a good friend. Like, again, another guy I chat with daily almost. So his comment is, what's the biggest surprise you've had in a year of the podcast? And what has the podcast brought to each of your lives?
Biggest surprise is definitely being sort of recognized from listeners at different events and saying, hey, good to meet you. I listened to the show and that sort of thing. I did not anticipate that, and it happened very early on in the show, and it continues to happen with more regularity. So that's a huge surprise. And I would say, well, it's brought me friendship. That's probably the number one thing, like, it's not like we're doing this for money. We don't make any money. So we're just doing it for passion. And as a result, we have good friendships that have come out of it, and more, not just watch related stuff, but just more really cool conversations. So yeah, that's what's brought my life.
For me, the one surprise was how willing people were to give us a chance and come on the show when we were first getting started. This year went by so fast; it feels like we're still just getting started, to be honest with you. But that's been really cool. The other thing that uh, that the whole thing has helped me with is the nervousness we've talked about, kind of overcoming some of those fears a little bit. It's different doing YouTube. Like I can stop, restart, edit, delete, toss a whole episode in the garbage if I want to. And this is not an option with this. So that's been a huge part for me too with this. But yeah.
Yeah, for me, the biggest surprise, apart from people coming up to us and saying, "Hey, I love the show," or getting the odd DM saying, "Oh, I love that interview," whatever. That's been amazing. But the biggest surprise for me is the immense satisfaction I get when the show's wrapped, it's edited, and it's ready to air on Monday mornings when I'm done. That satisfaction of having done and having been prepared and having, that's unbelievable. I never thought it was going to be like that. It's really, really, really satisfying when it's done. And what has it brought to my life? Well, you guys mentioned it. The amazing friendships I've developed with the two of you guys. We barely knew each other beginning, and now I find that you guys are part of my life now. You're not allowed to go away, so you can't quit the podcast.
Just like a
We are
stone
tied
in
to
the
hip.
shoe. Yep.
There you go.
I was kind of worried about getting kicked out of the podcast with answers like Charlie Sheen and stuff. But
Charlie Sheen would be amazing. It'd be great, absolutely great.
We also have a few questions from Wesley Wright, who goes by Wes and Watches. We met out in Vancouver briefly, and so he had a few questions for us here today that are watch related. And the first one was, do you have a watch you regret getting rid of and would easily buy back if you had the chance?
I'll tell you the one that has been coming up in the feed, because a couple of people I know one has recently bought the watch and another one's had it for a while, but seems to be putting it out there just to like rub it in my face for some reason. But the Pogue, I've owned the Pogue twice, and I had one that was like in just about very close, not, I wouldn't say perfect condition because there was some patina, but in very good condition and running really well, keeping great time. And I let that go to a friend's father in the Toronto area here. They're a father-son collecting duo. So I sold that to him, and I've regretted that ever since. And it's been sort of haunting me a little bit more lately. I got rid of it more than a couple of years ago, but that one keeps coming back now for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very loaded question for me. I've gone through hundreds of watches over the years, and I'm not kidding, probably closer to 500 watches over the space and time of 30 years. And I'm the type of person that makes a decision, sticks to it, lives with it, and very rarely regrets it. It's been my way of doing business in my corporate world. It's been the way I've been managing my hobby. I've never, and I said it before, I've never owned the same watch twice, except for maybe a dial color or a model update. But there is one that I do regret somewhat parting with, sort of. And that's my white dialed 42 millimeter Rolex Explorer 2 that I had in 2018, 19, somewhere there. Right before the market, like I'd acquired it right before the market started going nuts. And then when it did start going nuts, all I could think of was what I could turn that thing into, because it was worth double what I had originally gotten it for. And it was just climbing and climbing and climbing. And I did wind up turning that into 3 watches and a pile of cash. And I don't regret that because they were really cool watches and I had a great time with them. But I did love that Rolex Explorer 2. It was a light colored dial, which I love, the black hands, the contrast, the fact that it was a not very popular Rolex, that not as familiar people won't just immediately recognize as a Submariner or a GMT Master or Oyster Perpetual. So I like that. And you know what? My current Black Bay Pro, which is the white dial opaline version, scratches a lot of that itch. So coming full circle here, I'm very pleased with this specific watch. But that's one that I'd if the prices weren't stupid, if Rolexes were just like Omega, where they take a 30-40% bath after they've in the pre-owned, that's a watch I'd get back. I would never pay over retail, especially in the prices that they're asking for right now, or even at retail. I wouldn't. It's too expensive. I wouldn't do that. But that's a watch I absolutely love and do regret, moving so quickly. It's just the financials just didn't make sense for me to be carrying around that much watch on my wrist.
For me, there's two, and I sold them both to the same guy. One was the Halios Fairwind, and the other was a little Zodiac Super Sea Wolf that had a Sunray blue dial and a steel bezel. And at the time, I think I was just like working my way up into maybe more expensive watches, and I needed the money, and I knew that those were going to get a good return. Yet I look back on them now, and the Super Sea Wolf, even more than the Halios, I think was such a great summer watch. So as I'm heading into summer right now, I'm thinking about, unlike you, Mark, I like to wear NATOs and things like that. All the straps that I could pair that thing with.
Boo, boo.
That's the one. That's maybe the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Didn't that Zodiac had a little spring in the class to make it even more comfy?
I didn't.
Or
Mine didn't
NATO?
have a bracelet. Mine came on a NATO, and it came on a leather NATO.
You're doing watches wrong, man.
I had one of the Seawolves with the deployant clasp that has the little spring-loaded thing.
Yeah.
Really nice, actually. Yeah.
Sure.
He has another question for us here. This is, what is your hot take for watches, if you have one, of course?
First of all, I'll just say that of the three of us, Mark is definitely the hot take guy of the group. And I'm not a hot take guy. The only thing that I like, my thing with watches, I see a lot of people have rules with collecting, like certain sizes, vintage, no quartz, no whatever. And I don't like having rules with it. Like, I find like I got enough rules already in life. So that's kind of my little hot take. I just get whatever I want. I just the rule thing that is not for me. That's all. That's all I got. That's about as hot take as I get here. So Mark, let him have it.
All right,
just one, Mark, just one.
You guys are sitting down, right?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Toolless micro adjust clasps are for the birds.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. We need fine adjustment. If possible, even half links to really dial in the size properly. But making it so it's easy to size with a push of a button is just, it's too easy. And as a result, you're constantly fiddling with the watch. My Tudor is a fine example. I have it at a certain length. I'm comfortable with it. Make it a little bit bigger. And then, oh, it's too loose. I'll make it a little smaller. Yesterday night in my sleep, I felt it a little tight. So I decided to change the size. And I woke up my watch because the clasp clicked and she got mad. We don't need it. We never had it before. We had micro adjust little pins. You set it and then you live with it, and then you get used to the watch, and that becomes the watch. Having these micro adjust things now, everybody has to have them. Brands are trying very hard. A lot of them are using the exact same one, and frankly, it's useless. And some of them are too big. I mean, we all loved the Brocroft Element that I reviewed for the calibrated wrist. Brent, you had it for a little while. Photographed it. It is a gorgeous watch, but that clasp is longer than the lug to lug of the watch, and it's almost as thick as the watch itself. I'm sorry, it doesn't need that. My Grand Seiko has a shit clasp. Pardon my French. I think we're allowed one swear word without getting banned on YouTube or iTunes. But yeah, it has a crappy clasp. It's a stamp thing, but man, it is slim, it is solid, and it feels like $1 million on your wrist. Okay, we don't need all that. We didn't have it before. We don't need it now. And companies, look, I love a great engineered clasp. I love it when it's really solid. I love it when it's well made. The T-Fit from Tudor is absolutely top notch. It is probably the best clasp on the market. It is tiny. It is well made. It's solid. It does its job, but having to fiddle with it all the time, especially with someone that's obsessed like I am, who's constantly trying to dial things in, who's obsessed with the micro and the minutia, that drives me crazy. The Formex Reef clasp is phenomenal. Again, that watch, I was always fiddling with the size. I was moving links around to try to get it, centered on my wrist because of the adjustments. Look, we don't need it. Give me a good, well-made clasp without one. I mean, for years, Breitling didn't have a micro adjust thing, and their clasp snapped shut differently than everyone else. In fact, you had to take it off. You had to slide your finger underneath the clasp to unfold the scissors, because you couldn't just put your nail under there because there's no way it was coming apart. That clasp was out of this world. It was thin. It was, and now they've got the toolless thing. It's a bulky, it's beautiful. It's well made, but it's bulky. And again, I'm going to fiddle with that all the time. Keep the toolless functionality away, especially if you can reduce the bulk and the size of the clasp. That's my hot take, and I'm sticking with it.
All right, I'm gonna let Mark cool down for a second here. I don't have that many hot takes, but this one,
you guys are boring.
This one might be a hot take to some people, so I'll say it. A couple of years ago, I wrote an article called "What is a Tool Watch?" And at its base, most basic, it's a watch that does something else than tell the time for a particular job. But we mean more than that when we talk about a tool watch. We also mean that it's got to be rugged and robust, because a field watch is a tool watch and does nothing but tell time usually. So my hot take in that article was that there comes a point, and it's usually a price point, where the watch is no longer a tool. It doesn't matter how competent it is, how amazing it is, how anti-magnetic it is, how scratch resistant it is, whatever. When it comes to a certain price point, it's no longer a tool, because no one in their right mind would use it in a situation where they could break it. And so that would be sort of my hot take. And I'm stealing a little bit from James Stacey and Jason Heaton here, because in this week's episode of the Grade NATO, they were talking about something similar. They were saying that there's a difference between premium and luxury. And luxury implies some degree of superfluity, and premium is just, yeah, it might be amazing, but it's got everything it needs and nothing more for the job. And so just recently, like Mark knows, I had this Carnet version of the Tudor Pelagos Ultra. And even though those watches come without a movement on the inside, they you could just tell that that's a premium watch, and that it comes at a price point that, yeah, it's not inexpensive, but you could see somebody actually using it on a dive. You could see somebody, like wearing it in a rough situation and almost wanting it to acquire the scratches. And so that would be sort of premium. And then the Rolex these days is the luxury. It's become too expensive to use, like it was in the mid 90s, where like this is what James Stacey was saying, pilots wore it, divers wore it, etc. But now it's gone into that sort of ether sphere of too much for mere mortals. And it's almost like it would hurt your investment portfolio if you dinged it. So I feel like, in a way, Tudor has become, and I don't think this is necessarily a hot take part, but Tudor has become the new Rolex in that role, a really premium product for, actually, despite the fact that outside the watch world, people would think that $5,000 and $6,000 is a lot of money, for a really good price for what you're actually getting when compared to other brands that are out there. So yeah, I guess my hot take in amongst all that is more that it doesn't matter how amazing the watch is, once it hits a certain price point and it's not going to be used as a tool, it's just not a tool watch anymore. I can't see somebody driving down the straightaway in an F1 race wearing a platinum Daytona, for example. It's a great watch, but who would do that?
Yeah.
Well, you got Rafael Nadal playing tennis with a six-figure Richard Mille.
Yeah.
But the point you're making is, watch pricing. I wrote an article that I haven't published yet anywhere because people don't want to publish it, but it literally about pricing. And when you're talking about luxury, when Blancpain comes out with a almost $30,000 Canadian dive watch on bracelet, who's going to wear that dive? Like, when did 5-figure watches become the norm? Gerard Perregaux came out with a dive watch, a vintage looking thing in collaboration with Bamford. It's $15,000 US. There was a time when Gerard Perregaux couldn't sell a Laureato. RGM was the official service center for Gerard Perregaux in the 90s, and they had sent him 24 Laureatos to service and to get rid of. And he was liquidating them for like $900. Okay. These watches now are fetching $25,000. The same watches. When did we start accepting the fact that watches were 5 figures? Look, you said it yourself, Brent. To the outsider, anything over $150 for a watch is a lot of money. They buy a Timex, they buy a Casio, they buy themselves a G-Shock. they spent $100, $150, $200 at the Bay, or that doesn't exist anymore, but at those stores, that's an expensive watch. And no doubt, $150. I mean, nowadays it's a dinner for two at a restaurant, but that's still a lot of money. If $5,000, a lot of money for a dive watch. I mean, in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, you can go online and get a Rolex Submariner for $1,500 or $2,000 for a near new one.
Mm-hmm.
The Seamaster Professional dive watch that James Bond wore in 94, 95 in GoldenEye, $700 pre-owned.
Mm-hmm.
It was $1,750 brand new. And you can walk into an Omega dealer, this is US, you can walk into an Omega dealer and get 30% off by just batting your eyes.
Yeah.
Those days are gone.
No, you'll pay $4,000 or $5,000 for that same watch today used. So
the Speedmaster, which was less expensive than the Omega Bond dive watch at the time, is now an $11,000 Canadian watch. It's the same watch that it used to be. Okay, as a coaxial escapement. It's the same freaking watch.
Did you just try to sneak in a second hot take here?
That's exactly what I was just.
That's exactly what I'm doing, and it's something I'm very concerned with, because I've lived through being a collector when things were less expensive, and you can get a brand new Oris for $400, and now an Oris, if you want one, it starts at $3,000. And if you want one with the 400 movement, it's like $6,000 and above. Like it does not jive. People, like, our salaries have increased over the last 20, 30 years. All of us, we're all making more money, but the increase in how much we're making compared to how much things are worth. Yes, Brent, you're right. Things are, and this is a private conversation we had before, things are worth what people are willing to pay for them. And so long as people accept that a Rolex Oyster Perpetual is a $9,000 watch, that they can accept that the Moon watch is an $11,000 watch, they're going to sell them for that because they know they can get away with it. But it's not right. I'm sorry. That Gera Pergo shouldn't be $15,000 US. I'm sorry. It just shouldn't. The Blancpain 50 Fathoms, when it first came out, was a $100 watch. When it came out in or less than that, it was like under $100. And then through the 70s, it was like $150 to get a Blancpain 50 Fathoms. And it wasn't a luxury product. It was a tool. Now, you're right, Brent. Again, private conversation we had. Blancpain has to fit themselves in a hierarchy within the Swatch group, right? So you got Omega, Blancpain, Breguet, and all that stuff. You got to sort of fit yourself in there. But I'm sorry, man, $27,000 plus, if you're in Quebec, taxes, you're not getting a discount. So you're well into $30,000 for a watch.
Mere mortals like us have just been locked out.
Completely. And it's not fair because, we're the ones who are passionate about it. And the dum-dum off the street's not going to pay $30,000 for Blancpain. Who are they selling these things to? I don't know. So that's my other hot take. Yay, I got a second one.
Well, we're going to enter a speed round here for our friend Jamie, because he sent in a couple of questions. So, Mark, what are they?
So Jamie's got some Quements, Mad Rock on the Instagrams. So he says, when are you three trio coming to Newfoundland? He says, what are you guys doing a podcast live recording? When is the merch coming out? And when is the video component coming out? So I real quick, I can't go to Newfoundland this year because a lot of my travel is going to be going to Isotope, so that's not happening this year. But I eventually want to go to Newfoundland for sure.
I think that St. John Red Bar has to invite us and pay.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, they want to have us come in. Sure, that's a good idea. Live podcast recording. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know about you guys. It's in front of an audience. I don't know yet. I don't know. Make me nervous. My palms are getting wet just thinking about it. The merch. I made business cards. That was something. And then I had designed a baseball cap a long time ago with our logo on it. It looked really cool from Vistaprint. Maybe something we could do. I don't know. And as far as live video component, editing an audio podcast is a few hours worth of work. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine editing a video podcast with three of us plus a guest or two. I can't see that happening.
I'd do it, Mark. If you're willing to be on the screen, I'd do it.
I'm willing to be on the screen. Podcastle has a video component that like I once, which one was it? A couple of shows. Oh, it was the one with Felix. I hit the wrong button and I recorded the video.
Maybe even clips would be cool to do. Like if we're not, I got
to figure out how to splice out some of the audio so I can use it when I promote the Instagram and put it in the with the picture. I still haven't figured out how to upload audio. I think you have to upload it to the picture and then upload that into Instagram. I'm still working on that.
Well, I've talked to Jamie separately and personally about making the pilgrimage out to Newfoundland. So that's definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of time. I have a difficult time making decisions like that, but that's definitely going to happen. And I think that merch, is probably something that we'll do in the not too distant future, especially if we start having meetups and things like that. I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility. And as we heard this morning, straight from the horse's mouth, Bob's doing video. So
yeah. Now, you know what? Think about Newfoundland. I watched a show called Hudson and Rex, and there's basically a murder there every single week because those detectives have to solve it. So, it's a dangerous place.
That and the moose, I tell you.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is beautiful there. I went last year with my wife and visited Jamie and his family, and that is quite a place to visit. It'd be a lot of fun if we could do it for sure.
I spent a lot of my childhood there. Actually, my mom lived there for 3 years, so I go out there every summer. No, it's a beautiful, beautiful island.
I'm actually obsessed with having to go there because of that show. It's a beautiful area, and they had this one episode where a murder happened in Saint-Pierre-Miquelon, and it was on the ferry coming to Newfoundland. So since the murder happened so they had to travel there, and I got obsessed with the whole idea that that's a French territory, and then it's basically France but in Canada. So I'd love to visit all that. That'd be really cool.
So maybe sooner than we think.
There we go,
Jamie.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. So to commemorate our first show of our second year, our guest for episode 27 will be Richard Page, the pioneer who started the internet watch community with timezone.com. He's quite literally the person whose shoulders we all stand on. So I'm really excited. Talked about being nervous. I'm going to be a little nervous because I was a huge fan of his when he started. I was in my 20s when I was on Time Zone back then. He was a big part of why I got into the watch community online, and I can't wait for that episode. It's going to be wonderful, and it's going to be great. So thank you both for joining me today. Really appreciate it. The Time to Calibrate podcast can be found wherever you find good podcasts. Please do like, subscribe, review, and all that happy stuff. We sure appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments or Quements, you can email us at timetocalibrate@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Instagram. Until next time, T2C out.